Hi, this is Hobie Sears, Director of Training for Probo Medical, here with another Hobie's How-To, this time on the Logiq E10 and setting up DICOM networking. So before we really get started into the button pushing and that like, we need to talk about how are you going to physically connect to your DICOM network. And that would either be through an Ethernet cable, and if you're gonna connect through a hardwired Ethernet cable, you just plug into the back of the Logiq E10 and then into the appropriate wall jack on your computer network that your IT department has determined for you. If you're going to connect wirelessly, you need to be sure that you have the wireless password and you need to know what wireless network you're going to be connecting to for your hospital, clinic, or office, whatever it may be. So with all that being said, let's dive into the buttons. We're going to start off here on the 2D imaging screen. We're going to push the utility button, and then once we log on to the system, we will go ahead and push the connectivity button, which will bring us to the TCP IP screen, and we'll move on from there. Okay, so now that you're in connectivity, let's take a quick overview of the tabs we're going to be working with. We're going to start all the way on the left with TCP IP. We're going to then look at devices, services, data flow, and button, or on other Logiq products, you might actually see the word button flow. Now that we've taken a look at that, we're going to slide back over to TCP IP and start from there. So now let's start off by talking about how are we going to install the IP address that the machine is actually going to communicate on the computer network with. And there's a couple different ways to go about this, but we're going to use the TCP IP tab, which is again on the left-hand side and where we're starting. And if your hospital is using DHCP, which is dynamic addressing for the unit, it's really simple. All we're going to do is check this box, and the system is going to go out on the network and it's going to pull an address from a server on the network and set itself up. So that makes things very easy. It just depends on your facility's configuration, whether you are DHC enabled or not. And sometimes this also has to do with your PACS provider, whether or not they will accept a unit that's DHCP. This is all information that you will either gather on your own or your PACS department, network department has supplied for you. So for now, we're actually going to uncheck the DHCP box so you can get a look at what it looks like if we need to enter address on our own. So in this case, we have this machine set up on a little local address. So I'm just going to go ahead and type in the IP address that we're going to use today. So 192.168.25.99, and we're going to tab down. We're going to actually make the subnet mask 255.255.255.0. Again, this is something your IT department is going to provide for you. And the default gateway is 192.168.25.10. And so once we have that set in place, all we're going to do is come down and save the settings that we've just put in. At this point, the system is going to need to be rebooted to activate these changes before we move forward. Okay, so now that we've entered the TCP IP address and the machine has been rebooted, you're going to notice that the information that we entered in the wireless configuration section has now transferred down into the wired connection section. So this is just something you want to be aware of when you're doing a wired connection, that's going to occur. And now that we're done with this, we are going to move on to the device tab. Okay, so now that we are in the device tab, the purpose of the device tab is to start assigning AE titles and port numbers to the DICOM devices that are going to be on the network. And so that would include the ultrasound system itself and then whatever DICOM server that you are sending to. So when you first get in here, you're going to notice that the unit has this label of My Computer. And if you've never worked or set up a DICOM setting on a Logiq, GE Logiq system before, you may not realize, but My Computer is the ultrasound system itself. And that's just how they notate it. So we are going to go down below under the properties of the My Computer and the address that we entered on the previous TCP IP page, and we're going to add in the AE title of this device. And generally speaking, your PACS or IT company is going to give you the AE title that they want the ultrasound system to be and the port number. Now sometimes a manufacturer will stipulate a port number. With GE, the DICOM default port of 104 is just fine. So you will enter those things and we will click Save. And it's going to offer to reboot the machine at this point. We do not actually have to reboot the machine here. We can actually continue to go on programming and then do one reboot after we've done all of the devices. So I'm going to click Cancel and then come back up here and I'm going to click Add. And now what we're going to do is we're going to add our DICOM server that we're going to send to. So I have this machine connected to a little program called KPAX. And so I'm just going to enter that into here. So now we're going to enter the IP address of the PAX server. And we're going to click Save as well. And what you'll notice now, we now have KPAX listed, we have the IP address below, and we have this wonderful little non-committal face that we don't know whether we're connected or not. And if we click on this, and now we have a smile face, it means that we have actually functionally pinged, or we've made a connection between the ultrasound system and the computer holding the KPAX software. This doesn't mean that we're going to send at the moment. It does mean that this particular piece of programming was successful. So at this point, we're going to click Save again, and we are going to go ahead and reboot the machine, and we will continue on the Service tab. All right, now that we are in the Service tab, this is the point at which we are going to tell the ultrasound system what the server is, or maybe even servers are, that you entered on the device page. So on the device page where we entered the IP addressing, now we're going to enter the telling the unit what exactly the device is. And generally when it comes up, it will say destination device and it will be my computer. Well, we're not going to change anything about what the ultrasound system itself is. So you want to click on that and select one of the devices that you had previously entered on the device page. So I'm going to select the KPAX. And the next thing I need to do is tell the unit, what is this system doing? What kind of DICOM server is this? And if we click the pull down list, you have quite a few things to choose from. DICOM image storage, or even once upon a time there were DICOM print servers. The big ones that you're going to normally be interfacing with would be a DICOM image storage server and a DICOM worklist server. So right now I'm going to go ahead and just pick the DICOM image storage server. I will pick that and I'm going to click Add. And you see now that I have several new boxes that have appeared. And if we start down here under Properties, the first thing we want to do is we actually want to click in here where it says DICOM image storage, and we want to backspace that out. And we want to name that the same thing as our name of our PAX system. If not, and you enter multiple DICOM image storage servers, and if you don't do this, it can be very confusing later when you come back to figure out which is which, because they will inadvertently end up becoming named DICOM image storage, not the name of the actual server. In this case, we're going to go ahead and enter the AE title that's been assigned to this particular server, and its port number is also 104. Again, that number could be different, provided to you by the manufacturer of the PAX product. Now we're going to come up here into the Properties section and click all the boxes that pertain to this particular device. Now, under Properties, depending on the device that you choose, whether it's a DICOM image storage or a modality worklist, you will have different questions or different allowances in the Properties box. So right now it comes up and it's saying allow clips and use button settings. And while we haven't talked about button settings yet, that is appropriate. And those are pretty much the only things we want checked. There is a box that's called Allow Raw Data. Now, this is a feature where the ultrasound system can actually send raw DICOM data and store it on the machine and send it over the network. that takes up vast amounts of storage space. And unless you have a very specific need for that, which is not common, you want to uncheck this box or do not check it. So that pretty much is the rundown on the Services tab. Click Save and prepare to move on to DataFlow. Okay, so now we are in the DataFlow tab, and DataFlow is a nice and highly configurable tool, but not quite so obvious on how to set up a program. I'm going to try to help you with that in the next few minutes. What DataFlow is a list of actions that are automatically going to happen when an image is saved or the patient is ended. So let's start off by looking at the DataFlow that is currently existing on this Logiq E10. So right now we have a DataFlow of local archive internal hard drive. And what that basically means, and this is the default DataFlow for every GE Logiq that's made, and basically this just means that the system, if you store an image, it's going to stay on the unit, the local archive, and it is going to reside on the internal hard drive. That's really all that's meant. And if you look down below here, the default DataFlow on this unit currently is local archive internal hard drive. Now, where does this matter? How does this play into usage? Because it's something you need to understand to really finalize the DICOM setup. So we're going to click on the touchscreen, the patient icon, and go to the patient ID screen. And you will notice in the lower left-hand corner, there's a box, an area called DataFlow. And by the way, right next to that, that is the hard drive available space indicator. And on GE products, whether this is a line or a pie chart, that is a very accurate indicator of how much space you have on your hard drive. Just a little sidebar. But underneath that, you will see the DataFlow selected as local archive internal hard drive. And if we click on it, we actually could switch to no archive, which means nothing would be stored, and nobody would really want to ever do that. Or the next DataFlow that we're going to enter would be in this list as well. So this is where a sonographer could pick different DataFlows, and maybe there's a reason in your hospital you would need this, or clinic, or even doctor's office. Maybe let's say that the unit is used in radiology and vascular, and maybe radiology and vascular have separate PACS products. Or maybe you're connected to a children's hospital, and when you go across the bridge to the children's hospital, you have to connect to their PACS, not the main hospital PACS. So there are a variety of reasons that people might use different DataFlows. So I'm going to go back to Utilities and back to DataFlow again, and we're going to now add a new DataFlow. So I'm just going to come down here to Add. And again, it names it New DataFlow, and we do want to change that to something that makes sense. In this case, I'm actually going to use just the name of the PACS program that I've been using, which is KPACS. And then what I can do is I can actually come over to these two boxes that are here on the right-hand side of the two available boxes. And the first one, this one on the left, is the available outputs from the machine. So we already programmed in KPACS, and that's an available output. And so we could select that. And then now you can see that the arrows that are available here will move that into the DataFlow view for the DataFlow named KPACS. That's starting to get a little circular in its logic, and that's okay. But this is what we've done. Now we've said that when we store an image, when we're done, we're going to send that image to KPACS. And it's also going to be stored locally on the ultrasound system. Again, the My Computer is the ultrasound system, and the local archive, of course, being the local database on the ultrasound system. What we haven't done is assign any buttons to anything yet. We're going to do that in the next page. And then what we could also do is come over here and we could switch our default DataFlow to KPACS. And then we would save this. And the unit is saved and everything is backed up. We'll switch over back to the patient ID screen. And even though we marked that as the default DataFlow, in this particular case, it didn't reselect it for us because we haven't rebooted the machine. So I would just go in here and pick it. And if I pick KPAX as the data flow, now everything we store and when the patient is ended would end up going to KPAX. So we're going to switch back one more time to connectivity and to the data flow. And that's how you end up setting up data flow and making sure that your patients are going to go in the right direction. Okay, so the final step in setting up the PACS or DICOM send on the Logiq E10 is setting the physical print buttons to do what we want them to do. And as we go through this will have some similarity to the DataFlows setup. And so let me just give you the layout of what's happening here on this screen, or at least this part of the screen. So if we see here, we have physical print buttons, and that really does coordinate with the P1, P2, 3, and 4 buttons that are actually on the user interface of the Logiq E10. So right now we're currently looking at print 1. And for print 1, we have a print flow view, much like we had a data flow view for setting up the servers and where they're going to go, what's going to happen when a patient is ended. So what we would do here is add copy to data flow. Now, the unit has already added that in here. So we can see that highlighted right there, and I could take it out. But basically what would happen right now is if I hit P1 or print 1, when the case is ended, the Logiq E10 is going to copy everything I did with P1 into the data flow, and then it will go automatically. It'll follow the rules of the data flow. And so as we had set up before, data flow was designed to save everything to the hard drive and send it to the PACS server. And so that's what's going to happen because the P1 button is copy to data flow. Now, if you wanted to do something else other than copy to data flow, let's say you wanted to set P3 up to save to an attached USB drive, we would just add that in here. And the way this is setting right at this moment without doing anything else, we would actually, if you hit P3, it would copy an image to an external USB that you had plugged into the unit. But it wouldn't save it to the system. It wouldn't save it to data flow because we didn't include the data flow. Now we could actually do this and we could click copy to data flow and it would do both. It would not only save to the external USB, it would also copy to data flow. And that is the overview on the print button setup for the Logiq E10. Okay, so we've discussed prior about connecting to a hardwired or physical connection network, and now we're going to talk about connecting to a wireless network within your facility. So we would just come over to, still on the TCP IP tab, but we're going to come over to wireless network configuration and click that. The system will open up and will show you all the available wireless networks that you may have in your hospital or facility. And remember, some of these may come from, you know, the room next door, and maybe that's not the network you want to be on. Again, you will either know what network you're going to be on, or your IT department is going to tell you a very specific network. The other things you're also going to need are your network key, and you're going to last need to know the type of security that network, that wireless network uses. There are various kinds of security, and you would need to know that as well, because if you don't have the proper answer to that, the network will not allow you to join. In this case, we're just going to pick this network here, and we are going to click connect. And if I answered that box right there with an OK, it actually comes up. And a little bit of an odd thing with the Logiq 10 is even though we've picked the network, it still makes us type in the name of the network manually. So you're going to need to do that. And then we know the security type is WPA2 personal in this case. And then it brings up this box, which looks very much so like a Windows box. And it shows you the network we're trying to connect to, and that we would connect automatically when in range. And we want to simply move over to security on the tab here. And in the network security key, I'm going to type in the password for this, this wireless network. The advanced setting button, the advanced setting button is an odd setting that I've never ever had to use, so I don't think it will affect most of you. And now we're just going to click OK. And then we are going to click OK again. And the unit is going to connect to the wireless network. So once that's done, we can actually go back and close the connection tool, and you will see now that we are connected. We have an IP address and a gateway and the like, and we can continue with the rest of the DICOM interface setup by going to the Devices tab.
Hi, this is Hobie, Sears, Director of Training Field Service for Probo Medical. We offer a variety of training classes throughout the year at our Tampa facility, all taught by Probo engineers who are the most experienced in the industry. Please check out our website at probomedical.com for classes and dates.